We wanted to start the construction. I wanted to start the construction of next gen TV, so I'll just open the project. It's the same like what you did the other time, just started. But anyways, I'll just want to let's have a startup before we actually get into so many intense things. Okay, now beginning with everything, there are some concepts that you must know of, especially when it comes to Flutter. First of all, we are going to start with the aspect about widgets. Now we know that we want to actually start off with application development, but programming as a whole, let's say whenever you start programming and everything, most of the time programs are limited to, let's just say, writing the code. Actually, a way of visualizing everything was not always present. Yes, that's why if you are developing an application, the first thing that you must always have in mind is developing a user interface whereby people can actually interact with your application. Because if you are writing an application only in command line, let's say like C, that runs only in command line, whatever it does, people cannot manage it. So that's why having a user interface is very important. And as we spoke about the capabilities of Flutter, Flutter has a very powerful user interface experience, UI experience. So what that means is, with Flutter you can build literally everything you call UI. Yes, it offers very good tools and everything. Now when you are working with Flutter, there's what we call widgets. Widgets are the building blocks of every UI that you see. Yes, so Flutter uses widget-based architecture where everything is a widget. So if you go onto a web page, let's say for example this screen that you are seeing here, if you want to build it with Flutter, let me say for example you want to code it, this blue sector here like this with this text, this blue sector is a widget, this text is a widget, everything here is a widget. So it has named accreditations to each and every one of these widgets. So with a combination of these different widgets, now you can be able to build whatever you want. I understand that I think the concept of these functions, you may have forgotten them since we did them. It has been some time now. I'll do a video on all of this again. I'll do a video like the other one and upload so that you can go through them. Now widgets are the building blocks of the user interface and can either be visual or structural. Now when it comes to application development or development as a whole, there's what we call front-end development and back-end development. Front-end development requires you to create visual components that users interact with. So that's actually the user side. So that's what people actually interact with. And we have back-end development. Back-end development now implements the structure, the technologies, and all of the background operations that occurs between the application and the server. So if you go to a website now, let's say you go to Facebook, you open it and you see your name popping up, you see your profile picture, it's actually beautiful to you, you enjoy what has happened to the screen. But actually, in order for any of those information to be presented to you, there's actually communication between Facebook and its back-end server, which now uploads the picture and brings it to you. Yes, so we are going to start up in two sites, and when we start up, I'm going to first of all show you how to develop UI components very well, so that you can be able to build a full UI screen, full UI application without any back end. Then after that we incorporate now back end, because back end is actually, in fact, back end holds the basis behind development as a whole. If you cannot develop back end, you are only working with the front end, then you are limited. Yes, but bringing them together at once makes it very complex for you to handle. So we are going to start off with the back end. Now there's a principle we call the MVC principle. That's what we are going to be using. That's what I always like teaching people when I'm teaching them, because it makes development process very easy. What's MVC principle? MVC there stands for model, view, and controller. Model, view, and controller. What's a model? You are going to know more about that. What's a view? View is simply UI, and controller now implements the logic. So we are going to start up with a view so that you can actually understand everything. That's why we start talking about widgets. Now widgets can be combined to create complex UI components. Very important. We are going to see all of it practically. Now, there's a feature of Flutter which we call hot reload. Now, if you check on the previous video I did, Flutter supports an aspect called just-in-time compilation, JIT. What that means is, let's say you have all of this complex code like this. Oh, this project already has some stuff there. I don't want this, I don't want this, I want a new project. So okay, let's say you have all of this code like this. Now whenever you want to build this application, this is just an example, this is a demo code. If you run this, it's supposed to give you a certain UI. Now if you notice it, all of these are files that are running. So it means that whenever you want to actually run your application, what happens? All of this needs to be compiled, bundled up, compiled in your phone, and your phone has the ability to run it now. So what does this mean to us? It means that if you want to always run this entire application from beginning to end like this, all of these files are compiled, and most of the times it might take time. That's why that supports what we call just-in-time compilation. So what that means is the first time you actually load your application, you have written all of the code in this way. What happens when you run this application on your emulator, like what you did the last time? You saw an emulator which contained your application, or let's say you ran your application on your phone and you saw it visually on your screen. Now when you have this application which is running on your screen in this way, the first time that application has to run, what happens? It converts your entire code into an intermediate code. Now when it converts into an intermediate code, it renders it now on your screen. You can now view it visually. Now whenever you make changes to that application, that's what you noticed the other time. Whenever you make changes to that application, immediately you press Ctrl S. What happens? It updates on real time. The reason is because all of the new changes you have made can be compiled very easily, and the UI is produced to you. Why? Because the entire system does not have to compile, only the recent changes. That's what we're talking about hot reload. So whenever you have your application running, the ability for the application to be able to, let's say, respond immediately to your request, for example, to reloading. So it has the ability to render only the components for which you have actually modified. So the reason why this is possible is because all of the other base structure and everything has already been converted to an intermediate code. So this, only the new ones need to just be added and compiled. But there's what we call also the hot restart. Hot restart, now what does it do? It actually renders the entire application. That's why when you make great changes to your application, hot reload will not give you what we want. And now what do you understand by hot reload? Hot reload has the ability to show to you only the recent changes you make to your application. Now that's why you notice that when you have built your application, and let's say you disconnect it from Flutter itself, right? When you want to run it, all of the changes you recently made, you will no more see it. That's what happened the last time until you told me that the changes are no more there. The reason is because whenever the application closes now and comes back, you will no more see the changes. This is because those changes were not inbuilt with it, because your application needed to first of all be converted to a certain form. So it only presents to you what was at the base of that application. So if you want to be able to get all of that set up pre-packaged, what do you need to do? You need to rebuild the application so that it should actually rebuild now everything. It should now merge all of those other code now and compile it as required. We are going to see more about that when we start with the UI, because very soon I'm going to be launching the UI on my screen so that you can actually see. Okay, let's see. So state management. Okay, there are aspects now. There's an aspect now called state management in Flutter. Flutter provides various options for managing the state of an application, such as set state, provider, block, and redux. Now let's understand something. This application right now, what this screen that you see right now, every screen of your application has what we call a state. This is the state of our application right now. This text is found here, this text is found here, this one is found here, this one is found here, and everything. So everything seems static. But if I press a certain button, what happens? The entire page changes, the entire state of the application changes. So in order for you to actually perform this operation such that your application can be able to update its UI on real time, you need to know an aspect called state management. So you need to be able to control the view of your application. So as you have now seen here, the page has changed. What is happening? The state of your application is changing. Different components are coming on the screen. You need to be able to create an application that this is possible. Let's say, for example, you go to an application, they ask you to register. You have inputted all of your details. Immediately you click on maybe register button. What happens? You see something that is spinning, telling you that it is loading. Maybe your application is loading, struggling to come on. So what does that mean to you? Your application has responded to changes within the application and is updating the UI component with respect to that. So that's what we call state. Now there are different components that you can use to manage state inside of Flutter. We have what we call the set state function, which is the initial one, and we have provider. We also have a Flutter river pod. Basically what we are going to be using is Flutter river pod. Set state comes inbuilt within Flutter. Let me show you an example of the set state function. Don't bother, when we start working with live practicals, you understand what all of this. Okay, now look at this particular this is a stateful widget. You have what you call a create state. I'm looking for a set state. Okay, this that particular widget. I'm not getting you. I'm not getting you. I'm not getting you very well. I'm not getting you. I'm getting you, but it's a bit blur. I don't know, it's a bit blur. Yes.
I cannot get you. I cannot see your screen. It's very small. Can you zoom in?
Where you are on your screen, on your own phone, right? I don't know. Okay, since you are following with the laptop, if you are using your phone on the screen right now, you can zoom it. Like you take your hand on the screen and zoom it upward.
I'm trying to do that, but it's not good. I don't know why. Let me try it.
On your phone, just try it now where the screen is showing.
I want to zoom on my laptop.
The laptop the laptop will not show this zoom.
Yeah, phone time. Can you not zoom out?
I can zoom it, it's just I'm not really comfortable with it. Okay, press Control Shift and plus on your machine. Control Shift and plus. There's a plus sign. Press Control Shift and plus. Does it increase? I don't really know why is that. But it's just that I'm really okay. We are going to see more examples on your set state. Okay. So we are going to now move on to two particular things which are very important. Now we are starting off with the basics of widgets. Now widgets are the building blocks of your application. We know about that. Everything in Flutter is a widget. Now there are two main widgets you should know about. Every other widget is built using this. We have what we call the stateless widget and the stateful widget. This is a stateless and this is a stateful widget. What is a stateless widget? A stateless widget, once your UI is rendered on your screen, it can no longer be changed when you are using a stateless widget. When you are using a stateful widget, your UI can be changed on the screen while the application has rendered. Let me explain to you what I mean by this. When we talk about render, is the ability for your application to compile the code all and execute it. As we earlier said, I think if you have been watching the past videos, the ability for the application to compile this code. So when we work with a stateless widget, once your application has already compiled this particular widget and creates a form of it, it can no longer change. It remains static. It cannot more be rebuilt again to another form. So, but when it comes to a stateful widget, the UI component can change even after it has been rendered. So even after the application has compiled and everything, you actually see it on the screen, the application can still change if new information is added to it, or the application can be modified, or let's say that particular state, that particular page can be modified at that particular time. Now, a stateless widget is a widget subclass that represents a UI component that does not change once it is rendered. Stateless widgets are immutable and are rebuilt completely whenever the properties change. So what that means is, in order for your stateless widget to change, the entire application must build. It cannot build like that, like performing the hot reload feature and some other things. No, if you want to change a stateless widget, your entire application must build, so it can no longer be changed again. So that's why if you are using an application that that uses a stateless widget, let me show you an example. Let me open my phone. Let me open an example of an application that we did, so you can see the difference between a stateless and a stateful widget. Okay, so this is actually my phone now. So if I go to, let's say, this application we did called Tech Global. Okay, just notice what happens. Okay, this application now has a particular state right now. All of these components have already been rendered while this application is running. It's okay. So if I come here, let's say I want to publish post. This page has rendered and run to me. This page cannot more be changed. But look at something. If I maybe put a title here, I say hello, testing state. If I say testing state and I put just a description. Okay, so if I put this here now and I publish, look at what happens to this publish button. Immediately I press it, it starts rewinding, and what happens? It has processed, and at the end of the day now the post has been created. You can see now this is a post that automatically created. So what did you see? Look at now, this is a delete feature. I want to delete the post since it's just a testing. If I click on this, immediately I press delete, it has deleted. The UI has updated. So what do you see about this? You can actually see now that your application at this particular time, like that, the component can change over time. That's what we call a stateful widget. But a stateless widget like this, no matter how long it is here, it will not change. This thing might only keep on going like this. maybe changing over and over, but the component here cannot change by itself. That's what we call a stateless widget, whereas a stateful widget, once it is built, so it means that the difference between a stateless and a stateful widget is that once a stateless widget is built, all of the settings configured in it can no more be changed. So only the initial settings that came alongside that particular application at that time can be changed, whereas a stateful widget, no matter how it came, it can always be changed. No matter how it came, it can always be changed. So if you, okay, let's say for example, if I go I want to go here, let me show you a clear example now of what we call a stateless a stateful widget. Now this is an application. This text has loaded, this image has loaded. There's nothing I can do to change this image here. Why? Because it has already been rendered. I can no more do anything to it. This one, there's nothing I can do. But notice this like button, it is red now. If I press it, 0 likes. Check even this text down here, 0 likes. This one, it has gone back red. So what can you see from here? It is telling you that this application is able to respond to state changes. So right now the UI component updates depending on what I do. So what happens actually in this application, what happens here, immediately if I press this button, a series of events take place in the background. It checks the database and checks if this particular user, for example, I'm a user at this time, it checks if me, this user, have once liked this particular post. If I've not liked the post before, what happens? It updates the state with this red love, saying that I'm now liking it, and it increases by 1 like. If I've liked it before, what is going to happen? It's going to say reduce it. This is what now we call polymorphism. What powers this particular thing now is what we call polymorphism. So I can come and like this thing. You too running your own phone can come and like this thing, but your own will still go to 2 and not interfere with my own. The reason is because polymorphism enables one function to be used on in diverse means. So if you notice it here, I'm logged in here as Nebuta Ismail. If you create an account here, your own account will still come as something else, and you also be able to perform different operations from mine. So that is an aspect of stateless and stateful widget. Everything in Flutter is built either using a stateless and a stateful widget. Now there are terminologies that you need to be aware of. What did they say first? A stateless widget is a subclass. It's a subclass. So what that means is stateless and stateful widgets are classes. If we saw how to define a class in Flutter. How do you define a class? Since you're not seeing very well. Okay, now if you look at this particular thing, this is an example of how a stateless widget is built. We are going to walk through the process. These are just examples of stateless widgets so that you can understand what it's all about. This is an example of how a stateless widget is built. We simply create a class, but the class does what we call it extends a stateless widget. Now we spoke about the aspect of inheritance when we're looking at object-oriented programming. If you went through the video from previous, what is inheritance? Is the ability for your application to respond, or let's say to inherit properties from a parent. So it's like it takes features, properties from its parent and is able to use it within itself. It's like you being able to give birth to your child and your child inherits your properties. So in Flutter, if you have a certain widget or if you have a certain class, you want it to use properties from another class, what happens? You need to inherit its properties. So how do you inherit it? You use the extends keyword. Now, stateless and stateful widgets have been pre-built inside of Flutter and cannot be changed. So what happens? If you want to use them, you must create a class that extends them. So if you now extend a stateless widget of this form, you define your class and all of its properties. Here, this is the constructor. I don't know if you saw what a constructor is in the previous video that I sent. A constructor is the one responsible for creating the class, instances of the class, creating objects from it. Now, if you notice it, every other function is here. The only difference now is that this particular thing extends a stateless widget. Okay, so that's what a stateless widget is all about. Now, where's a stateful widget? Let me show an example of a stateful widget. Okay, this is an example of a stateful widget. You have class, live session, extend stateful widget. Now, what is stateful widget? It means the UI component of this application can change over time. The UI component can be updated. So if you go now down, you see a property, you see what we call a set state. What is set state? It's the ability for you to modify your state. Look at what it says. Notify the framework that the internal state of the object has changed. Whenever you change the internal state of a state object, make the change in a function that you pass the set state. So what happens? This particular if you check here, int page equal to 0 is the ability for your let's say for example, while I was using tech global like this, when I was using this application, while I was down here, if you notice it, if I click on these things that are on the bottom, what happens? My page changes. So this is a stateful widget. Why? Because it has the ability to respond. And what happens? A widget like this set state is the one responsible. So if you see it, we say on page change, this is a widget. Sorry, this is a function. On page change, you should set state page is equal to page. Don't bother about all of this logic, you understand it. Right now it should be complex. Yes, but if you notice it, what we are saying is whenever you press this function, this particular whenever this function is called, it should set the state to something else. So what is happening? You're updating the UI whenever the person presses that button. So if you notice it, when we talk about application development, or let's say development as a whole, many people think that it should be printing print X, print F, all of those things, to be printing things on the screen, to be writing function to add two numbers, to be writing loops. No, that is not application development. That is just training. But everything you do when it comes to application development, or let's say to coding, for example, it's to be used on real life. And when you implement it on real life, that's where you actually get to actually know the power of all what you are doing. So let's just see if there is anything before we get into the programming itself. So widget basics, we have stateless widget. I've explained that. We have a stateful widget. Stateful widget is a widget subclass. Okay, so this is an example. Okay, now I'll go ahead and show you how to create a stateless and a stateful widget. Now let's understand now, what are widgets? What is the architecture of a widget? What is the architecture of a widget? I don't want anything to be on this tech global application. I don't want all of these widgets to be there. I want to start something new, so I want to delete them. Okay, this is next gen TV. Okay, that's the live session. It should go away. Okay, so all of the pages are supposed to be gone. Go. Okay, so now only the main.dat file is. Now let me just tell you what this main.dat file is. If you open inside of that, or let's say inside of Flutter, there are many folders and everything, but there's one particular folder which is where all of your code is, or let's say everything that you have to code which is supposed to be updated, it is found inside of your this particular lib folder, and everything that has to run is found inside of a folder called main.dat. inside of this file. So it's just like when we're talking about maybe C programming, or we're just looking at that, we said your main function is the input to your application. So whatever needs to run and render on your screen, it must be found inside of your main widget. So in Flutter, there's what we call a main.dat file. That is actually now the input to your application. So what that means is if your code has to run, it starts running from your main.dat file. Everything that is here, if you notice, see the main function is inside of the main.dat. I'll clear this screen so that we can start off the programming from beginning again. That's when we have actually finished talking about our widgets. Okay, now let's look at something. This is an example of a stateless widget. I want to show you how to build a stateless and a stateful widget. So if you are in Flutter, if you want to build a stateful widget like this one, I'll press STL. Automatic it's supposed to okay, it's loading, analyzing. Oh, this is a shortcut to just always get it up. Okay, my thing is analyzing. Let it finish. It's going to come up. Okay, so this is just an example of what was here. Now if you notice it, what is here? We have class main app. I don't know, do you have a mastery of how those classes work, like what we did during the last video? Hello, are you still there? Hello. So are you still with me?
Yeah.
Okay. I was asking about if you still have like mastery of what the class, how classes work, and as I said in the proceeded in the last video.
Yeah.
Okay, so now a widget is like a class. Now whenever when you were working with Flutter, we had what we call let's say with that and other programming languages, we have what we call functions. What is the purpose of a function? A function is a block of code meant to do a particular operation, right? For a particular purpose. So if you want to add two numbers, you can write a function that does that. If you want to maybe do whatever you want, print anything, you use a function. Now when it comes to Flutter, there are specific functions which now are used to build what we call UI, which is now used to build user interface components. That's what we call a widget. What is a widget? A widget is used to build user interface components. So a normal function, let me say if you want to add two numbers, if you want to write a function, I'll say int add numbers. I'll say int add numbers. I can now put them here in a comma int b. Then I can now just return a plus b. What have I done? I've written a little function that adds two numbers. But now what is this going to return? It's going to return an integer. There's one that if you do it, it's going to return a string. If you put string, you can return a string, you can return an integer, you can return a bool, you can return a list. All of those things, they are fine. But when it comes to Flutter, there are specific widgets that are only used to return to us what we call UI components. And what are these widgets? What are these particular functions? They are called widgets. So if in front of it if you write a function but the return data type is a widget, what does this particular function describe? It means you want to return UI component. So those are just basic knowledge to know now, so that while we are going to be working with it, you actually get a hold of it. Now let's look at the architecture of a stateless widget. So what does a stateless widget contain? It contains a class which extends its properties from a stateless widget. Now this class is exactly like our normal classes, but you know that a normal class, by default, classes don't have a return data type. Or let me say, classes do not have, yes, classes, pardon? I'm not getting you. There's no God, so I don't know why. I don't know. Just please just try to join with that your other phone. I cannot really get you well.
Go to the chat box.
No, when you have a class, classes don't have a return data type. What is a class? A class is a model of a real-life entity. So what does this mean? A class holds the general characteristics of objects. So what does a class contain? A class contains attributes, and it has functions or behaviors which are inside of it. The behaviors are called methods. So it holds what you call attributes and methods. So a class is a representation of a real-life entity which gives its general characteristics. Let's say if you want to have a person, you are going to have, like if you check the previous video, you have its name, its age, all of those things. Then what is a constructor? A constructor now is that agent which helps you to create a class, create an object from a class by passing in the required arguments. I will encourage you to go through the previous video. There's around the end section, I did a very detailed section on object-oriented programming where you are going to understand those concepts. So classes by default, they don't return anything. Yes. So now there's the peculiarity about these stateless and stateful widgets, or let's say if you actually want to build a UI component. Now a stateless widget, as I said, does not change over time. So what do? You create a class. For example, you have a class main app, we have just called it. We extend the stateless widget. Now inside of the class, this particular one here, we have cons main app, then we have super.key. Now what is this? This main app is simply our constructor, but this our class has no attributes that we want to collect. Let me say, for example, if I wrote here string name, or let me say page title. If I wrote here string page title, I put it like this. Now remember, this function can never run as long as this particular page title has not been assigned. So I must say page title is equal to, maybe I give it, before the error will go up the screen. Expected identifier, what is this? It's like the page is still loading. Okay, what is this? The page is still loading, that's why. Okay, now okay, yes, that's come. Now let's look at something. If I put here string page title, I've put it here, right? It's now actually showing here that is okay. But look at something. If I remove this and just put string page title, this class can never run until I put the page title. So now when you are writing a class, you need a method to actually set the class such a way that the page title is not just given at this particular instant, but you will need a way of collecting the page title from another maybe from another instance, such that you can create an object. So what do I need to do? I'll come here and I'll put I'll come here and I'll put this dot page title. So when I put this dot page title like this, what does this mean? Why is this thing? There are two braces, I don't know why. Expected to find. Yes. So now if I put here main app this dot page title like this, what does this mean to me? It means that this particular page title is required for this page to come up. So I can now put what we call here a required keyword. Yes, if I put a required keyword now here, this page title now is required for this particular page to run, for this particular page to come up. So what does this mean? This particular main app here, this one here, is what we call a constructor. So whenever I want to create an object, an instance of this class, what do I need? I need to pass in this page title to this constructor before it can actually create an object. So remember, what is the difference between an object and a class? An object has an identity. So now let's say, for example, this is a class main app that I've run. I want it now to be able to run on my main function, because on my main function should be able to run that particular class that I've put. So I want it now to run. So I'm going to come now here in this function. I'm going to call in the main app. So I'm going to call main app like this. Yes. So now the main app requires something. The main app requires what we call the page title. So I'll need to put now here, or no, you need to put it like this. You need to define page title. Okay, page title, I'm going to now put it like this. I'm now going to say title. Okay, so if you notice it, everything now is fine. So what does this mean? What does this mean? I have now this particular one here that we call main page. This is what I'm actually passing to my main widget, to my main function. So this is what is going to run. So what does this main function do? It calls this particular class, but in order for this class to come, it needs a page title. So I'll pass now the page title here, which I've called it title. So now it means that this particular class will be created with the name title, or let me just say I can call it first page. I can still call this same main app again, this constructor, and pass it another name. I can now say that second page. So what are those? Those are objects of this class. These are instances. So they are actually almost different. Why? Because they have different properties. So this class is just here to give you the overall base structure, but whenever you want to actually call this class, you must specify and give it all of its parameters. But there are possibilities for you to create a class without any attribute that is required. It is still okay. So now I will remove that, and I'll remove, or let me just leave the page title there like that. Okay, now we have this constructor. I'll put it const means it's constant. We are going to actually see the difference, the reason why that constant should be there at times. Okay, now let's look at something. After we have our class, we have now what we call here a widget build. Whenever you have a class that extends a stateless or stateful widget, there is a specific function within it which we call the build function. What is the build function? The build function is what creates the UI. So the build function takes in a parameter called build context. Now, what is build context? Build context refers to the component of the UI you're actually dealing with. So the context now, okay, let's say for example, if you are having a particular page on your screen, let's say while I was at this PowerPoint presentation, if I click on go next like this, what happens? This page has changed, it has gone to the next page. So the context functions accordingly to the state. But now if I want to maybe, let's say, click on something on this screen, how does my application get to know that this is the particular page that I have clicked on, this is the particular widget that I have clicked on, this is the particular thing that I have clicked on? It should hold properties of this particular page that makes it identify it. That is what we call a context. That's what we call the build context. The build context now helps the application to identify your different widgets, identify your different UI components. So that's what your build context is. So whenever you want to build a page, let's say for example, the build method is actually responsible for building UI component, for creating UI component. Whenever you want to create any UI component, you must have a parameter called the build context. The build context now defines the properties that are required for that particular context to exist. So what happens, it can now set it such a way that it can be identified. So this particular widget, this particular build widget now like this has a context. The reason is because we have actually passed it a build context. So now what is build context? Okay, this is a definition here provided by Flutter. A handle to the location of a widget in the widget tree. So as I said, it actually gives now information about this widget so that you can actually identify it. So that's why I say a handle to the location. So now what is the build function? What is the build function? Describes the part of the user interface represented by this page, by this widget. So what is the build function? It's what is responsible now to create you that particular UI component that you want to see. Now remember, the widget does not just return a number, it does not return whatever, it needs to return a widget. This particular build function needs to return a widget. And what is a widget? We have defined what a widget is. So this one, I'll not go about this one because this one now are specific types of widget which we are going to be seeing along the long run. So that is how a stateful widget works. Now let's get an example of a stateless let's get an example of a stateful widget. So I'll put stf like this. Why is my machine too slow today? My machine is slow. Still loading. Okay, STF like this. You see a stateful widget to pop up. I'll just click on it. So if you notice it, the reason I'm doing this is so that she just build me, she will just give you the layout. So I'll just call it now test page. So the structure, how to do this one internally is not the problem. It's about understanding what comes with it. So we have a certain class test page. It extends the stateful widget. So it extends the stateful widget. All of these ones where we have state, test page, create state. No, this is Flutter's own architecture. This is Flutter's own architecture. You are not supposed to know each and every one of these internally in your head, but this is the architecture which is used to create your stateful widget. So now you need to just understand that your stateful widget has the ability to modify over time. So that's why we call it mutable. Mutable means the state can be changed. So now it also has a build function. What is the build function? The build function takes in what we call a build context. So every class that you see which extends either a stateful or stateless widget must have a build function within it. Now this one also returns a container. A container is a sort of widget which you are supposed to know about. Okay, so the reason I was going through all of this is because every page that we are going to be building in Flutter, we are either going to be using a stateless or a stateful widget. So this was just for you to have an overall knowledge of what it's all about. So while we'll be doing now the real coding, or we are coding real applications, you will now see how each of those now function. Okay, now let's I think we should proceed. So now there are specific widgets. These ones are not top level widgets. They are not top level widgets like the stateless and the stateful widget. These ones are widgets that are just used while you are building your UI. This one are just simple widgets you are using while you are building your UI. Now your power while using Flutter, is you being able to identify the different components of your UI screen. The power of you as a Flutter developer, in fact, whatever page you want to do, in everything you have to do, the first thing that you must strive for is being able to identify the different components of your UI screen. Let me say, for example, I will open this the free conference call that we are actually on now. This is it. So if I am actually on this page, what do you see? This is a UI screen. Now I need to be able to identify the different components of this particular screen before I can build it. This one here, this is what we call the header. This is the header of my page. They call it in Flutter, we call it an app bar. This is an app bar. This one here is simply it's like a box. Inside of Flutter we can call it a container. Inside of the container we hold different things. Here down here, what do we have? We have an icon. This is an icon. This is a text. This is an icon. This is a text. This is an icon. This is a text. This is a number on top of here. This is a navigation menu. When you click on it, different things pop up. Let me open this application Tech Global that we're working with. Or yes, let me open this. Okay, let me just open this one. I think this one will have more a better UI component to understand. Okay, this is Power UV. Now look at up here. We have an app bar. Inside of this app bar, we have a text inside of here. We have an icon here. Here we have what we call a pop-up menu. Here, if you come down, we have a text. We have a text down here. The one is like a heading. Behind we have a background which has an image. Behind here we have a text. Here we have text which has a background. So if you notice it very well, all of these things have a name, and immediately you know the name of each and every one of them. You can implement each and every one of them at any time. Very simple as that. Anything that you see, you just need to be able to identify what it is, and Flutter gives you exactly what you need to build it. So now look at this particular page from downward. What is this? This is simply an image which is here. Specifically, we call it a circular image in Flutter. Now if you come here, we have a title. Here we have text. Here we have an image again. We have this. Here we have a line. Now here we have this is a bottom navigation bar. This is a bottom navigation bar. If you come up to this other page, what do you see? You see an image here. You see a title. You see this one is called a search bar, which you can implement by yourself. So if you notice it very well, everything here has the ability to be created so long as you can identify it. So that is, you now as a developer, you actually now need to be able to identify each and every one of these components. So that's why I'll go ahead now explaining all of these different UI components that are of necessity that you are supposed to know. The first one is what we call a container. A container is a widget. Okay, let's say a container widget is a versatile layout widget that provides various properties to control its size, appearance, and positioning. Now let me explain that to you very well. When we talk about a container is not actually a widget maybe that displays text or something. No, it simply provides what we call space. It provides what we call space to an application. So what does that mean? When you use a container acts as a parent that can take in other widgets and put it inside of it. let me show you an example of a container. Let me show you an example of a container. Okay, this particular page that we are using now, you can build this page in Flutter. What is a container? A container may refer to this particular all of this particular sector like this, all of this particular sector that you see text there. This could be a container. Inside of this container, we have this text widget here, we have this other one, we have this other one. All of them are found inside of that container. So it's the same way. If you check this one, it's the same way when you check this one. What happens? This is a okay, let's say for example here, this one, let me show you. This is a container. Inside of this container, we have a text here, we have a text here. Then one of the powerful features about a container is it has what we call background decoration. So whenever you want to implement something that has background of this sort, what do you need? You simply need a container. So the container has a background decoration, and it gives you the ability to edit the components of the screen, as you see it like this. The ability to edit the components of the screen. You can now place anything in your own side. Here, this is simply a button. This one is a button. This one is an icon. This is a text. This is a text. This one has a background image. So if you notice it, it is very simple. The moment you can identify each and every one of them. Look at this also. This is a container that has text here, it has text here, it has an icon here, it has an icon here. So look at how simple it is. So it's simply now your ability to identify each and every one of these things. Where is a container? Where do I need to place a container? How do I need to use it? It's now up to you as a programmer. That is now what we call now skills. So you now need to be able to identify each and every one of these components to actually work with. Now let me okay, let's see another one before we work with UI. So container widget, it can be used to customize the width, height, padding, margin, border, and more of its child widgets. Now, one thing that you need to know about a container is when you are working with a container, you can clearly define the width of the container. You can clearly define its height. You can clearly define its padding and margin. I want this particular content to appear at the side of my screen. Okay, I want this to appear here so that I can just be working with. Okay, like this. Yes, I want it to just appear like this so that okay. So now look at this particular page. This is a container, as I said. For example, this container has full width. It has, if you notice it, the height of this particular container does not cover the whole screen. If you notice it, the height of that particular container, it does not cover the whole screen. Now look at this particular one. The width is shortened. This one too, the width is shortened, but it still has the same components. So what that means is when you're working with a container, you have power to control the internal aspect of the container, such as the width, the size, the width, the height. Now when we talk about padding, now look at this particular button down here. Why is it that this button does not start exactly where this thing is, where this line is down? Why is it that this particular one, this particular widget here, this particular container and everything does not touch this other one? That is what we call padding. Padding is space between the components inside of that container. So this distance from here, from this edge to where this button starts, is a padding. Notice the text. The text does not actually just start immediately where this thing is. It gives some space. That is padding. So it refers to the internal spacing within this particular object, that container. When we talk about margin, margin refers to space between different objects. Padding is refers to internal spacing within the object, whereas margin refers to space between the different objects. So the space between this one and this one, this is called the margin. The space now between this line and this text which is found here, that is what we call a padding. So when you are working with Flutter, your containers have the ability to adjust this. So in order to actually work and control your UI, if you put it inside of a container, what happens, you will be able to control all of these aspects. So now if you check here, we have what we call, this is an example code. So we have what we call container. The container is the widget, right? A container is a widget. Now remember, these are other sorts of widget. Now the stateless and the stateful widget are the base widgets. Now these ones are other forms of widget which have already been developed by Flutter themselves. So what happens, they now give you the ability to just edit the component. Now if you check here, we have what we call a width property. So if you want to call a width, now this is exactly like a class. Remember, let me show you something. We have what we call a container, which is a widget. I told you that a widget is a class. Now what happens, this class has parameters. What are examples of its parameters? It has a width, it has a height, it has padding, it has margin, it has decoration. So do you see, this is now what we call properties. So now a container itself is a class on its own, but now we have created an instance of it which now has different parameters. The parameters have now different identities. Now look at this container. This container has all posts. It has get all posts in one place, visit now, but the height is full screen. This one is height. So you will be shocked to know that it is one container, but you see it now in different forms. This is what we call polymorphism. When it comes to development, this is what we call polymorphism. So one container, if you notice it, it now comes in different form. It now comes in different forms. Until there are certain times that you can look at it and even get confused that is this one the same as this one? Yes, it's the same thing. Look at, if I come here, okay, this particular one, okay, this is still a container that could be here like this, but it has different internal components. So if you notice it, it is one thing performing like other things. So that's how good it is to actually work with these things. So if you notice it, this one is still a container, but look at how the components are. Look at how the components are. So when you work with a container, there are properties that you need, that the container class provides to you. It has properties. So one thing I would encourage you to learn very well is the aspect of classes. So classes should be something you should take emphasis on, so that you can actually understand now how these things are built. So this container, let's see an example code on how to implement a container that requires all of this. In fact, after I explain this, we are going to code it so that you can see how to create the class container without using this. Let's say we want to create the class on our own, yes, without actually relying on Flutter's own stateless and stateful widget. The only thing that you need to understand about Flutter stateful and stateless widget is that when you write the code of your own, you will not be able to implement UI until you extend either the stateless or stateful widget. Okay. So now we have what we call the width, we have what we call the height, we have what we call the padding. Then there is a specific property here which is very important. We call it a child. Now your container has what we call a child. What is a child? Child now refers to the components which are inside of the container. So this is a container. As I told you, the container has a background picture, but now there's what we call a child. The child now refers to what is inside of the container. That's what we call a child. So your child could be a text like this one you have seen here, hello, whatsoever. So now let's implement a function that does this. let's implement our own class that has the capacity to do this. I just want you to have a deeper understanding of what classes are all about. So I'm going to create a new file here. Is there any program open? Why is my machine slow like this? So I'll just see container dot dat. So every file here must be on a dat format. So that's why we told us that that is the programming language powering Flutter. So we have container like this. Now if you want to create a class, we are going to call class. After we call the class property, I'll now say container. It's always good to start the name of classes with the class names started with a capital letter. So I'm going to say class container. I'm going to open it. I'm not going to be extending a stateful or stateless widget as of now, because we don't actually want to display you. I just want you to have a deeper understanding on classes. So now let's check on the first property. The first property was width. So what do we do about the width? We are going to see okay, the width is a double variable. It's a double. So I'm going to say double width. I'm going to put it like that. I'm going to say double height. So the reason we are doing all of this is so that you can actually know that the purpose why you are learning all of this all of these things are not just for you to be writing those small programs that this is all what you are writing. No, the purpose you are writing these things is they actually have very deep application when it comes to real programming itself. So these are applications now of what we have been looking all along. So we have double width, we have double height, then we have now what we call double. Okay, now the next one is what we call the decoration, the padding. Let's look at what that padding was. Now look at it. The width is a double normally, the height is this, but look at something. The padding says edge insects dot all 8. So what kind of data type is this? Edge insects dot all 8. No, this one particularly is not a data type. This particular one, this is now something that has been formulated by Flutter themselves, and now I'm giving it to you. So now this could be a class that Flutter themselves have developed and imputed all of the properties that you want inside of there and giving to you. So when we are working with Flutter, if you talk about the padding, for example, this edge insets, it means we're actually dealing with the edges of the application. Where you see dot all, it means we're actually dealing with all of the round corners. When every widget has 4 corners, we have the top, bottom, left and right. So we'll talk about all, it means the padding is going to be applied to all. So it means this particular one, edge insets dot all, means that all of the different corners have a widget of a size of 8. Now there is a very powerful tool that you are supposed to look at, which is called the Flutter docs. This is where when you go there, you are going to see all documentation involving Flutter. So what that means is there are so many widgets to the extent that you can never know all, and you can never know the properties of all. So when you go to these Flutter docs, they are going to help you now define this. They will define all of these things for you. This thing has not finished up to now. Okay, this is why my machine is slow. Now I get it. I'm installing an operating system on my machine. This is what we call virtualization. I'm installing an operating system inside of my operating system. This is a Linux operating system. Okay. So okay, I wanted to show you. Okay. Oh, that thing is Wow, that operating system is really eating me up my memory. That's why the machine is slow like that. Okay, so okay, now this, when you go on to this side, you search for the Flutter, no, Flutter, yes, Flutter dev, or you can see here Flutter dev, Flutter docs. So you simply go online and search for it. Okay, documentation, yes, so Flutter documentation, that's where you need to go to. So Flutter documentation gives to you all of the widgets you are supposed to know of, all of the different widgets, and it tells you how to use each and every one of them, because Flutter has thousands of widgets. There is nobody who will teach you and give you all of the widgets and how to use each and every one of their property. So whenever you have a new widget in mind, you come here and come and know the function of that widget and how you can use it and all of its properties. So the only thing is you need to know the basic widgets which are recommended to you. Okay. This is for all Flutter widgets. Okay, widget catalog. Okay. Okay, so widget catalog. Okay, so this is Flutter widget catalog. Okay, so when you come up here, you'll be able to okay, so you have docs, this particular this particular URL. If you want to do it, you should just put this particular URL, docs.flutter.dev/ui/widget. So that's the environment that they're giving us. Now these are the different widgets that you can look at. We have accessibility, animation, all of this, but what we want, look for material widgets. Where's material widgets? Okay, basics, widgets you need to know before building your app. Okay, let's look at basics. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. This is an app bar, this is a column, this is a container, this is an elevated button, this is Flutter logo, we have icon, we have a row, we have a placeholder, we have an image, we have scaffold. So this is just some. So if you still go back to the widget catalog, you can see all of them. So let's look at example now of a container. Wow, my machine is really slow. Okay, so it's a container first surrounds the child with padding, inflated with whatever they call it. My problem is so that you is for you to see the different properties and everything. Okay, so if you go now here, this is it. Container for constraints. We have box constraints that expand. So when you come to places like this, so you can now see all of the different properties which is here. Okay, these are all of the different properties. Now if you check here, we have an alignment, we have child, we have clip behavior, we have constraints, we have key, we have margin. So we have different methods built. So all of these ones like this, there's no way that we can see all of them. Yes, so that's why they provide this documentation. So when you have time, you try to look at the documentation to see how they work, but I'm always going to show you the essentials, the essential ones that we need. So all of the ones which are essential for our work, I'm going to always show you them. Okay, so the reason I was going to you through that is when you look at this thing they call padding, you see edgeinsects.all, this is powered by Flutter. When you see margin, edgeinsects.symmetry, this is powered by Flutter. You have decoration. Now the decoration is not you going to put there that maybe the decoration is blue, this, no. The decoration, you need to use Flutter's own architecture. So inside of Flutter, the decoration properties the decoration takes in what we call a box decoration. Box decoration. What is box decoration? Box decoration refers to another class which maybe Flutter has already developed, right? Inside of the box decoration, we have what we call a color, we have what we call a border radius. Then now we have a child. The child now takes in a widget. So now let's see. So inside of here, I'll put padding. I'll put padding. Okay, no, this is not padding. Remember, if you want to put a parameter, the first thing that you need to write is a data type of that particular parameter. So this one is supposed to be an edge insert. Since the padding needs to be something edge insert, as Flutter says that it should be. So edge insert. No, that's not how Flutter wrote it. Let me look at exactly the terms that Flutter represents it with. Edge insects, yes, so it's edge insects. So come here, we have God, my machine is slow. It's supposed to be edge insects geometry. Anyways, our machine is really slow, it does not give that, but that's how you work on all of it. But this, what I'm doing now, you will never have to do it. I just wanted to show you how classes work. Our machine is really slow, it cannot perform what I want it to do. So if I can put the double width, double height and everything, so immediately I put this. Now what happens, I create a constructor. How would my constructor be? I'll call a container, I'll call the class which is container. Now inside of this container, what do I need to do? I need to pass in now my parameters which are required for this widget to function. So I'll say this dot, or let me put required. So required means you actually need it. So I'll put required this dot width. I'll put required this dot height. So those are two things which are required. Let me put the last one, widget, which is supposed to be the child. So the last one is a widget which we call child. So I'll also put here required this dot child. So what is going to happen now, whenever I want to call this particular class, I need to specify all of these things. So I want to wrap it up in hi God, why is my machine this slow? Require this dot width, required this dot height, required this dot child. Okay, so now I've put my container. It should require all of these various things as I've put here. Now what does this mean? It means that whenever I want to create an instance of this particular container, what do I need to do? I need to specify all of these different things. So if I come now here maybe to my main function, and what I want to call on my class. Yes, if I want to call on my class, maybe, okay, you see the container that is here. This one is Flutter's own container. So if I want to call my own container, I need to do what we call an import. We are going to see about that. I don't want to get so much into that. So what does this mean now? The width which we are required to put is going to take a value of double. The height is going to take a value of double. But this child now should be a widget. So it means that if you want to pass in the child, if you go and pass in a text, it's going to refuse it. That's why if you notice it, if you notice it now, function what has been given here, this padding, if you go and give padding here, you go and put 10, it's not going to go. You must specify the format that Flutter themselves have given you. If you go and put margin, you go and put your own. No, margin is edge inserts. When you put edge inserts dot symmetric, what does it mean? It means that you are only dealing now with the symmetric axis. Is it vertical or horizontal? So when we talk about horizontal, the padding, the margin that you put is going to be both on the both vertical axis. That means it's going to be at the top and at the bottom. So if you put a margin of 16 vertical, what is going to happen is you are going to have 16 space on the top, 16 space on the bottom, 16 pixels. Now when we talk about decoration takes in a property of what we call box decoration. The box decoration has a color, it has border radius, it has other properties. Then the child, now we have put a text. It's not always text, so you can have other things. So while we'll be looking at real life practicals, like maybe we are developing an application on its own, we are going to see how that one actually works very well. So now let's look at column and row widgets. Now, what is a column? Now let's take a look at this particular app. Yes, newsfeed. Okay, now let's looking at this app. If you notice something, all of these things are appearing in a form of, like, in a continuous order like this. They're actually going up, they are scrollable and everything. But how do you do this? A widget by default, let me see if you have a text, cannot perform this. So that's why we need specific widgets which we call columns and rows. What is a column? A column is it gives you the ability for you to nest images in a vertical manner. So you can have widget after widget going down depending on how you set your column. So you can now have a column which takes in many widgets at a time, but the widgets are arranged in a vertical order. We have a row. Look at this one. We have one here, we have one here. This is what we call a row. So the row has now two widgets inside of it. Now when we are working with both columns and rows, these different widgets which are found here are called children. When we're looking at the container, we had a child, but this one they call them children. So if you look at this particular example, you are going to see an example. We have column. The column takes in a property called children. The children now refers to all of the widgets which are going to be there. So we'll talk about the children. We have text widget 1, we have text widget 2, we have text widget 3. So the children, also remember, the children is a list of widgets, and in Flutter you need to be able to denote a list. We are going to see more about lists and maps. We are going to see more about lists and maps. So when you put all of the widgets here, what happens? They are going to display in this order, going down. We now have a specific widget now here we call a scaffold. A scaffold. What is a scaffold? A scaffold is a specific widget in Flutter which creates pages. It's what is responsible for creating a page. If you look at any application, a scaffold is responsible for creating the entire UI screen that you see. So anything you see in the form of a page, look at this particular screen. What happens? This entire screen, everything you see here is what we call a scaffold. Inside of the scaffold, which is a page, you can define all of the various properties of this page. So a scaffold has several properties. The first one is an up bar. The second one is a body. And the third one is a bottom navigation bar. Now, what is the up bar? The up bar is that static component which always stays at the header of your application, right? This one. The body, you can customize the body with anything that you want. Put anything that you want here, is your body. We have now the bottom navigation bar, this static component which also appears at the end. So if you notice, this is a structure of every page, and a scaffold is what helps us to define that. So if you notice it, we have a certain scaffold here. The scaffold has properties. As I've said, it has an up bar. The up bar now does not just take maybe any number or whatsoever. The up bar takes in a specific widget at the up bar called an up bar constructor. So called an up bar, the widget it takes is what we call an up bar. So, and that up bar has a property called the title. It has a property called the title. It has what we call the body. The body could be anything that you want to put. When we are really looking at the practicals, we are going to see more about this. Right now, I just want you to have a brief knowledge of all of the concepts. That's it's good that I'm also recording it so they can also go through it. Now, if you look at the body, it has this. We also have a bottom navigation bar. So when you are working with a scaffold, you basically have the power to define all of the components. Let's say if you look at this other screen, this is the up bar here. Is this up bar moving? If you see, this up bar here is static. Everything here is static. Now we have also a bottom navigation bar, and you need to know how to design pages. A page should have an up bar. What is your up bar? Your up bar, most of the time, it contains your menu. If you go to most websites, you are going to see a search bar where you can search for things. If you notice it, even the search bar, what do you notice? It is a page, which is another scaffold. So whenever you want to display a full page, there's a specific widget for it called a scaffold. So what is a scaffold? Now the scaffold is that widget that helps you to create pages. So it actually spans your entire screen. So it has difference with normal pages. If you notice, everything here now is a scaffold. So that's how it is. So whenever you want to create a page, if I say create one page, what do you need to do? You need to define it inside of a scaffold. Then you continue now with whatever you are doing. Now we have a scaffold working with assets in Flutter. Okay, now let's take a look at what assets are all about. We still have some things to do. Version control systems, we look at design principles, object-oriented programming, some things I need to know about, package, API, storage, Firebase integration. I don't think we'll finish everything. So the aim of this is just so that you have mastery of you have some knowledge of all of the concepts before we begin our actual development. Okay, loading. We're working with assets in Flutter. Now let me ask a very interesting question. Given that we are developing, one thing we must strive to do inside of our application is the ability for our application to display to us images, videos, and other components. So if you check here, we have images behind here. We have, sometimes you have videos, sometimes you have audio. So now what's an asset? Inside of the application, assets are simply these let's say these different elements that you can show inside of the application. So if you want a video, if you want an audio, whatever it is, you need to input them as assets. You can put them inside of the application as assets. So what do assets do? Assets live inside of your application. If you go to your application now, you can upload a video to your database or upload a picture to your database. For example, this app, if I come here, these are posts that you see, but these posts like this, they are not inside of this application. They are at the database, so they must be rendered from the database. So that's why they need time to download. If you notice, this is an audio. If I click on it, you can play. I can also download the things. So these ones are living on the database. But this particular picture which you see at the top here, this one, in case it is not, let's say in case this one also depends on the database, there are going to be days that you load your application and your application is not connected to the internet. What is going to happen? This thing will not load. Why? Because your application is not on the internet. If you go places like here, you see this is an image. This one is connected directly to the internet. But if you notice it, this particular one here, all of this one are inside of the application. Those are properties that make up the application. So we call them assets. So assets live within your application. What is the purpose of assets? Assets are mostly there to aid your process such that these particular components will get to live inside of your application, thereby increasing the speed of accessing them. So whenever you work with assets, you increase your speed of access. So you will not have to waste too much time accessing them, maybe downloading them over the internet. They live within your application. So whenever you are working with assets, also one of the things that you should always try to do is always try as much as possible, let your assets file not be too big. Now, how do you work with assets in Flutter? When you want to work with assets in Flutter, you must go to Flutter and go and define your assets for where your assets are found. You must go and define where your assets are found. Now, this in your Flutter project, create an assets folder at the root level. This folder will be used to store your assets files. Declare assets in popsec.yaml. Now let's understand what all of this means. This is my project. What is my root folder? My root folder is this folder that contains all of my different folders and everything. So inside of here, I'll create a folder here called assets. It's a folder. This folder, I've put it in my lib folder. It's not supposed to be inside of any folder. It's not supposed to be inside of any other folder. It's just supposed to be at the base level. No, I don't want it there. have to click outside the screen. Yes. Okay, yes. So I'll call it assets. So inside of this assets folder now, this is where I can store things. Let me tell you a great example of what assets are. Logo. If you want to create your application and the application has a logo, will you need to load your logo every time from the internet? No. You want your logo to exist within your application such that you can use it at any time. You can use it at any time, the logo. So how do you do now with this asset? So these assets now, if I go now to this project directory, if I go now to the project directory where the project is found, which is here, Next Gen TV. So if you notice, if I come here, this is the directory, this is the root folder, this is the assets folder. So anything that want to be included within the application, you see it here. Let me go. This is Power UB, the application that we are working on now. This is it. Look at this is the root directory. This is the root directory. Okay, let me just open the lib folder. This is the lib. So you see, these are all of the folders that are inside. But looking at the assets, look at something. You will notice that all of the pictures that you can actually see inside of the application are here. All of the pictures you can actually see inside of the application are here. So let me do this side by side the application so that I can actually show you the pictures, all of the different assets. Looking at this particular one at this top, where is it? Let me locate it. Okay, this is it. So this folder, this particular image at this top, this is it. This one with this man holding a red, this is it. So these particular ones now exist within your application. It makes it very simple for accessing. Yes, so you need to always work with assets in your folder inside of your application such that users don't have to overstress to get access to this content. Now if I come here to info, if I click on this info, it loads this. This refers to all of the information about the application, Power BI and everything. But this particular thing that renders to you here is a PDF file. But if you notice it, immediately I click on it, it does not download it from anywhere. It just shows it to me. What is this? It is actually an asset. It's actually a PDF file which is found. If you see here, we have PDF. This is a PDF document which loads inside of here like this. So this is what we talk about now, application development. You being able now to incorporate all of these things. So it's more than just printing X, working with all of those things. No, this is where now you get to apply all of those things. So right now, I just, as I said, knowledge on what all of this is about, so that while we'll be working a real life example, you will get to understand every step of the way. Okay, now when we have created our assets folder, the next thing I need to do is go to your popsec.yam file located in your root folder and create and add assets. Now if you create your assets folder, now to communicate to your project, to Flutter, that this is my assets folder and this is where my images are. All my assets must not only be images, they could be anything, pictures, videos and anything. So when you want to access assets, go to this specific folder and get it. So how to do this, there's a Flutter they call popsec.yaml. This is where you store what we call packages. All packages are files which are required in order for your application to run. Yes, so we are going to see there's a whole section on packages, so there's no need for me to talk much about it now. So if you come to packages, you are going to see the concept. So now if you come now down here to Flutter, if you notice here, we have we need to include our assets folder. So you go to add assets section under Flutter. Now under Flutter we need to put assets. We add now where our assets is. So how now do we do this? Put now here assets. So now after this, under this assets, we are going to now put assets slash. So what does this mean to us now? What does this mean to us? It means that we are actually now referencing the assets folder directly from within our application. So that particular folder now becomes now the, let's say it becomes now like that particular assets folder becomes now like the particular directory which your application is going to now use in order to interact with all of the assets files that you have within your application. So it's actually very important to always present your assets. Okay, so oops, there's something I forgot. Please, there's something I forgot. You always put this. There's a hyphen here. Yes, you put the hyphen. Okay, that's how you define your asset. Now this asset, you are telling your project that this is actually your asset property. This is your asset property. So then immediately you have your asset property. What do you need now? You need the folder. So this one that says assets in this form like this is actually specifying the folder where your asset is. So that's it. So when we are working with live examples, you are going to now see how we actually reference what is now on our assets. Let me see if this thing is finished. Installation has finished. You can continue testing Linux now, but until you start the computer, changes you make documents will not be preserved for start. Okay, so that's how we work with assets. So okay, you can see here we have assets, then we have hyphen. Now you can decide while working with assets, you can decide to link only specific images. For example, here they have put assets slash my image.png. What is happening? They are referencing only a particular file. Assets slash my fonts.ttf. This is to load a font. This one is data my data.json. So these are different files that you can access, but the one we have given is not referencing a particular file. We have just given the directory to the entire assets folder, so we'll be able to just use it directly. We'll be able to just use it directly without maybe specifying the direct place where it is from. So indentation is important in YAML, so make sure to align the assets properly. Okay, aligning means keeping it in straight order, as you saw the way we put it like that. You can specify individual assets file or entire directories using globe patterns. Now referencing assets in code, you just need to call on the image.asset. For example, if I want an image inside of a Flutter, so let's say if I come here and I want to actually display an image here as a widget, the image is also like a widget. So if I want to display an image here, I will call on the image. No, image is 1M. Image.asset. So if I put my image.asset, I now need to specify the directory where the asset is found. So I will now say assets folder slash, maybe I give it the name. I can say logo.png. What is happening is going to go into my assets folder and go and locate a particular file called logo.png. So that is what this one stands for here. So that is how we start working. That is how we start working with Flutter and assets. So assets is something that you should always be calm around when working with. Okay, so I think loading JSON, okay, you can go through this. JSON, most of the time you really need to load JSON. So JSON, as I said, JSON there refers to JavaScript object notation. The purpose of JSON file is to JSON is in fact is one of the most widely used methods of data sharing. So this is mostly the method in which data is being transmitted between your application and your server in JSON format. Yes, so if you want to load JSON files, you need to also specify it on your assets. So if you notice here, we have asynchronous. Anyways, this one is not too much important to us now. Using fonts, so you can also load fonts to your application using assets. You can also load fonts. So the next one will be version control systems. I think version control systems will start them during the in the next class. So the version control is working with GitHub. So you need to provide a way whereby every code, whatever you do here inside of your program, you can upload it to GitHub directly. You can upload it to GitHub directly. It happens immediately. Immediately it is now just sent directly to AWS to build it and maybe run it and test it. That is called for debugging about anything that we have done.